Okay, so here we are with the second to last chapter in the book. This one's we'll be covering. Um, you'll notice I did not go with the weird blue CGI picture that said used the one from the book. I didn't think anybody needed to see a blue CGI boner for this, so here we are with this front splash image here. This one is going to tie really closely into the last thing that we're going to cover, which is development. So really you can kind of consider these two chapters as the front half and the back half of really the same thing. So with the reproductive system itself, we're thinking about basically two sets of things, not male and female, but two different sets of things. These are the primary sex organs, right? Gonads, and then the accessory reproductive organs, which is everything else. So the primary organs here are just the testes in the male, ovaries in the female. All of the other parts, all the other things that we get so worried about, those are just the accessory parts to it. Okay. The primary sex organs here, they do two things for us. They do production of gametes, which are the sex cells. So we talk about sperm, talk about eggs. That's what those are going to be. And they also secrete sex hormones, right? So our androgens, andro being the male prefix, estro being the female prefix here, androgens and estrogens. Those hormones do lots of stuff. We've talked about them before as being growth hormones, growth and development hormones. They take over for growth hormone at puberty. And so you stop producing growth hormone in the quantities you did before. Sex hormones take over. I always see a big part of the development here is of the reproductive organs themselves. At and post-pubescence, those things really take on a different life, if you will. And then also behavioral cues here as well. Sex drive, driven in part here at least by those sex hormones. So we're going to start with the male side, not for any particular reason. The book starts with the male side, I guess, is the easiest place to do that. And it's also a little bit simpler. There's fewer moving parts, stuff like that. To me, it's a good way to start. The male gonad, the male primary organ here is the testis or testicle or testi or any variety of terminology there you want to use is fine with me. And it sits within a muscular pouch. Yes, there is muscle associated with that called the scrotum on the outside of the body. And here, for our purposes, outside of the sex hormone realm, the object here is to produce the male gamete sperm. Those sperm eventually leave the body through a series of ducts or piping, if you will, starting with the epididymis, then ductus, or sometimes it's the vas deferens, to the ejaculatory duct, and then out through the urethra. Now, you, of course, will recall the urethra from before. We talked about the urinary system. Here in the male side, only, it is doing double duty. Okay, so the urethra also is the passageway for sperm as well as semen, as well as for urine. Along the way, we are going to take sperm and add a bunch of stuff, particular from seminal vesicles and the bulbourethral gland. Secretions. And that's going to become semen. Right, so semen is not just sperm, it's all this other stuff too. Additives here primarily from the seminal vesicles and the bulbourethral glands, but to a lesser extent also from prostate. So if we look at our moving parts here, begin life down here, phylum number 1, in the testicle, testis, testi, again, whatever. We're going to be produced in here, and we're going to pass outward into this structure here, Number 2, the epididymis, which is this sort of thing sitting on top of the testicle. And then back up and out and around all the way through here, right? This is the vas deferens. Then we're going to enter into the prostate, which is this guy right here, the prostate. This little part right here. So I'm going to pull up a white screen here. So if we're in the prostate, right? So here's our prostate. We have the urethra coming down. All right, so the prostatic urethra is here. And then joining the urethra inside here, so this is coming in from the vas deferens. This little part right here, this is the ejaculate. Okay, so it's just this little tiny little stretch of tubing inside the prostate before it joins with the urethra. And then out through the urethra on the way out. The last little bit that gets added here is from the bulbourethral gland on the way out. Okay, so let's start here with number 1, with the testes themselves. Surrounded by 2 different layers, 2 different tunics. The tunica vaginalis, which is the outer layer. It's actually peritoneum, believe it or not. Your testes, if you're male, actually originate inside your abdominal cavity and migrate south. The reason for this being that prior to terminating sex in the womb, the testicle and the ovary are actually the same organ. The ovary remains in place. The testicle makes a little migratory journey south, so it can be outside of the body and held at a cooler temperature for sperm production. So the peritoneum travels with it, forms the outer layer there, and the tunica albuginea is the inner fibrous layer on that. Within the testes itself, we're going to divide that up into a series of lobules, each of which contains, and this is really the important part here, the moving part here, the seminiferous tubules. These are responsible for sperm production. I'm not super worried about most of this stuff. Remember here also that they are producing our androgens as well. So here, we got a little cross section. Here is our testicle here, right? And all of these little lobules within here contain these little dudes right there. These are our seminiferous tubules. Okay, they dump their product out here into this. Okay, so that epididymis is the first part of our piping then. We'll travel from the epididymis into the ductus or the vas deferens, up around the bladder and back down, enter the prostate where we become ejaculatory duct, and then when we leave the prostate, we are in the urethra. There's one other thing here to kind of take note of. It's the penis. This is the male external genital, okay? Technically, the external male side includes both the scrotum and the penis. The penis is what we call the copulatory organ, okay? So during the act of sex, right, or copulation, the penis, the male part of this, is inserted into the female copulatory organ, which is the vagina, yada, yada, yada. You guys know all that stuff, I hope. Penis itself has a couple of parts to it. We have a root, which is actually embedded within the body itself, a shaft, which is the external part. The shaft ends in the glans penis, and we'll see a picture of this in a little bit. Depending on your religious or social or whatever else affiliations, you may or may not have a prepuce or a foreskin, technical term for it. It's a cuff of loose skin that covers the glands. This is sometimes removed during circumcision. Sometimes it's not. Doesn't really make a difference one way or the other. The penis is, we'll skip here just to show you this. The penis, so here we have the shaft, the external, and the root, internal. And here is the glans penis. The important part of the penis here is that it is erectile, that it can fill with blood, become stiff so that it can be inserted into the vagina during copulation. This is achieved via spongy tissue, or erectile tissue is a technical term for this, okay, that fills with blood and is held at high internal pressure, okay? It's like blowing up a balloon, one supposes. And in that way, we maintain or create and maintain an erection. Now, there are two sets of erectile tissue within the penis. There is the corpus spongiosum, corpus here means body, spongy body, corpus spongiosum, and cavernous or hollow body here, corpora cavernosa. The corpus spongiosum surrounds the urethra, okay, and then expands out into the glands. Cavernosa are paired right and left on the dorsal side. So if we go back to our cartoon of the penis here, in section, here in cross section, right, we have the corpora cavernosa here and here on the dorsal side, the spongiosum surrounding the urethra, but here in the glands, the erectile tissue here in the glands is all spongiosum. As far as semen, again, it's sperm with accessory secretions from particularly these bulbourethral gland, the seminiferous tubule, or seminiferous tubules, these guys right here. Yeah, get back here, right? So bulbourethral gland here, and the seminal vesicle up there. Add things to this, water, fructose. It's slightly alkaline, so there's bicarbonate in this. On average, we're looking at about 2 to 5 mils of semen. Not a lot, honestly, but it does contain up to maybe 150 million sperm per mil. So there is a lot of sperm in this relatively small package of fluid. The reason that it is alkaline is that the lining of the vagina is fairly acidic, as is the lining of the male urethra. Both reasons for that is to inhibit bacterial growth. Right? Again, remember, these are exposed to the outside world, right? So in order to keep that acidity, that acid mantle from killing the sperm, we kind of surround them in this bicarbonate-rich fluid, keeps them from dying. All right. Now, we're not going to get too far into the process of production here of either sperm or egg, but I do want to kind of give you a broad overview of it. You will have seen it in other courses. You'll see it in other courses again in the future. But just to kind of give you a basic idea behind this, for all of these processes, we'll come back to this slide. For all of these processes, we're going to be undergoing what's called meiosis. And meiosis is basically like mitosis, right? Remember, mitosis. Only we do it twice, and we don't always duplicate the genome, right? So for mitosis, white screen here, right? Mitosis, we start with one cell, 2 copies of DNA, right? Duplicate DNA, and then we split the cell. We have 2 cells, each, it's an each with 2 copies of DNA. Okay, so we end up with 2 normal cells at the end of it, right? Meiosis, that is just meiosis. We start with 1 cell, 2 copies, right? We end with 4 cells, okay, with max 1 copy each. So it's a little bit different. And the reason that we do that, right, the reason that we end up with 2 copies with 1 copy of the chromosome, 1 copy of the DNA each. Is that, remember, we have to combine them. So we have a sperm with 1 N. So N here is basically the number of copies of each gene, right? We have egg, that's 1. And we end up with a zygote, getting a little ahead of ourselves here. That's 2N, right? And remember, a normal cell is 2N. It has 2 copies of it. So we need to make sure that the gametes only have 1 copy, so that when we combine them, we end up with 2 copies. If we have more than 2 copies, if you have 3N or 4N, things get real bad in a real hurry. So that's the whole point of meiosis here. So I'm not going to get, like I said, not going to get too far into it. I'm not going to get wild into it. It's basically doing mitosis twice, and just the second time we don't divide the DNA or don't duplicate the DNA. That's all it comes down to. Okay. So I'll leave this up here if you want to read this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but I'll leave this up here. Same deal here. You can see this. You can read this. Not very exciting. This figure happens to be in your book. It's figure 26 or 27.6. I like it as a good comparison of mitosis over here, mitosis over there. But for us, really, the big take-home message in the last part of this particular chapter here is that on the male side, spermatogenesis, that's one word, spermatogenesis, the end result of meiosis is 4 sperm, right? We take 1 cell and we get 4 functional sperm out of it. This is not going to be how the world works on the female side. Okay, so really, if you remember one thing from all of this, right? Remember that male side, meiosis, spermatogenesis. We start with 1 cell, we get 4 functional cells at the end of it. Okay, all right. So we'll call it good there. We will come back the next section, the next lecture. We'll talk about the female side of things, and then we'll move on after that into really my favorite chapter, the developmental chapter.